So this morning I find myself in Lithgow in New South Wales, and many of you guys will know that this is one of the only places that makes firearms in Australia, and there's a rich history here of doing so for well over 100 years. Now I've been to Lithgow a couple of times, and every time I've been, the Small Arms Museum has been closed, generally because it's a Friday and they're only open sort of midweek. That's also a problem here because it's Monday. They've been very generous that they're actually going to open it up for us this morning. So I've got a few minutes spare. I'm going to have a little look around because there's some pretty cool displays in this park I've found. And then we're going to head over to the museum and show you what I'm told is pretty darn amazing. Anyway, let's get into it. Pulled in at the Lithgow Small Arms Museum, and yeah, they've opened it up for us, which is very kind of them. And here we go, Brian is here ready to meet us. Morning, Brian.
Hiya. Nice day for it.
So we are at the Lithgow Small Arms Museum, and this is Brian who will be taking us through today. Thank you very much for this, Brian. Now this is a pretty iconic image.
It's the most photographed item in the whole museum.
Yeah.
Copies the Australian Rising Sun hat badge, and it's made up of a sample rifle from each year of manufacture of the SMLE.
Wow.
Started in 1913, the final version was 1956.
So Brian's going to take us through and give us a little bit of history of, obviously the guns that were made here, because we're on the side of the factory, part of that, and also some of the other interesting history about the post-war, what they did to keep busy. So we'll go through a little bit of that as well. But if people want to come and see the museum, they can do so, can't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's open to the public Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays and weekends all year, and during school holidays it's open every day.
Yeah, definitely, and hopefully you guys will see shortly. It's worth getting to if you're anywhere near Sydney, or Lithgow, I guess. Alright, let's go for a little look.
Yeah. So looking at a board of tooling that was manufactured for making 303s, made at the factory in 1918. When the factory started, all the tools were supplied by the contractor, Bren Whitney. It took about 6 years for the tool makers in the factory to gain the skill to make all their own.
This was all sort of around the
That's all tooling to make SMLE rifles.
Yep, that was the original purpose.
The factory was set up to make 303s.
Do that.
The contract was to make 15,000 a year. When the First World War started, the Army asked them to increase their production. By the end of hostilities, they had made about 98,000.
Wow.
The workforce went from 240 to over 1,200. They bought more machines in, some from Pratt & Whitney, some from other British suppliers. They started off making rifles, well, I say rifles only, they also made charger clips, little spring-loaded clips that the bullets fit in. They diversified in wartime when England retired the Lewis gun and adopted the Bren. The plans were sent out here and they set up a factory to make them. When England adopted the Vickers gun, plans were sent out here. This factory made 303 Vickers from about 1928 onwards, made upwards of 15,000 of them. When the factory opened, the rifle barrels were rifled. They had the spiral groove put in it with a single point broach tool, which took one cut on one groove, very shallow, took a number of cuts to do one groove, then the barrel was indexed and they started again. Took almost an hour to rifle one barrel.
Wow.
With the L1A1, they went to button broach rifling. You've got a series of cutters on a string. Each one is slightly bigger than the one before it. You pull them through once and the barrel's rifled.
Yep.
Currently they use a cold hammer forge. You start off with a short, fat blank, which you deep hole drill and ream and polish, and then put in a fairly severe machine, which has tungsten carbide hammers. You put a tungsten carbide mandrel in that is a model of the rifling and the cartridge shape, and cold forge and cold hammer the blank in onto that mandrel. The mandrel retreats, the hammers advance. You get a finished barrel out in about 7 minutes.
It's a good improvement.
It came in towards the end of the L1A1,
Okay.
so in the 80s. You can drill a deep hole through the centre of a bar of steel and rifle it, but often you'll get very slight meanderings in that hole. A skilled operator can look through it against the light and say, oh, it's got a little bend in it. There, and you can put it on this, which has a couple of brass supports and a hammer, and tap it and straighten it.
Wow.
So just about everybody that started at the factory was tested on that. About 1% could do it. Barrel straightening was a skilled and reserved occupation. That is the jig.
That is the jig they used.
In cities rifle his barrel on that one,
Oh, yeah.
rotate it and say, oh, about there, tap.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to do that. No chance. I'd be definitely the 99%. What about you? Is that something you can do? No. No, never tried?
No. Inherited some rifles with bent barrels and I've straightened them, but only for display. Would never try for a target on.
No, I've definitely blamed some bent barrels, but probably won't bent.
The factory had a test range and every 303 made was put in a jig identical to this. There was a whole row of them and was aimed in, test fired for function to make sure it worked and for accuracy. Failed either. It went back through the factory, got dismantled and the parts reassembled into something else. Between 1913 and 1956 made about 642,000 of them, so the jig's got to work out.
How does this work?
The recoil mechanism mimics the human shoulder.
Right.
The gun can recoil. It had a temporary telescopic sight dropped on the top. It sat on the foresight blade in the V of the rear sight, and you could look through it and aim at a very small target that was about 5 metres away, and it was then had 5 rounds put through it to make sure it was accurate. It should have been zeroed. There are minor adjustments available. You can put a slightly higher or lower foresight blade on the rifle. You can tap it to and fro. It was done with things like a G-clamp, but it could be pushed around a little bit and checked. This is the main gun room. It's the reason the museum can exist. The company changed from Small Arms Factory to Australian Defence Industries in 1988, and during ADI's period of tenure they decided they didn't need their reference collection, which was a room full of guns comprising samples of guns they'd made, samples they'd brought in for evaluation and comparison. After a bit of toing and froing with Lithgow Council and ex-employees who were keen on the idea, they donated the whole collection to the city of Lithgow for a museum. This is basically that collection. One of the rarer guns we have. Looks like anyone else's SMLE. It is in fact a proof weapon produced by Pratt & Whitney as part of their contract to set up the factory. They were required to produce a small batch using the machinery that they were then going to pack up and send to Australia, and as far as we are aware, that is the only sample that is still intact. At the start of the Second World War, there was just one factory. It was the Lithgow Small Arms Factory. They were immediately deluged with orders from the army, and the site just had inadequate production capacity and room for 2,000 employees. They decentralised. They set up annex factories, feeder factories in all the local towns. So you found small arms factory annexes in Bathurst, Orange, Forbes, Cowra, Wellington, 9 different places. Because of the number of orders they had, they progressively decentralised the rifle construction to the feeder factories, and from about the middle of 1942, when they sent a barrel rifling machine to Orange, the rifles were the sole responsibility of the annexes. All the rifles after that were made in the feeder factories. The Lithgow site, which had 6,000 employees working 3 shifts, concentrated on Brens and Vickers. And in the peak week of the war, the annexes made 4,000 rifles, and the Lithgow facility made 140 Bren guns and about 70 Vickers guns. That included spare barrels, magazines, carry cases, cleaning gear, the whole bit.
Wow.
After the war in the Pacific simmered down, they reduced the demand and the construction, and in fact the feeder factories started closing before the end of the war.
Yeah.
But they maintained that for months. Yeah. The Australians followed the British in using the Lewis gun as their light machine gun. It had its limitations. The English were actively looking for something to replace it. An English officer was visiting the continent and saw a weapon that interested him at a Czechoslovakian gun show. It was the ZW26 light machine gun, air-cooled. Rang home and said, "You better have a look at this." And the powers that be were also interested. They asked Bruno, who were the manufacturers, to make trials models for the British in 303 calibre. They played with it for years, and it seems like a competition. How good can we make this thing? Its name evolved from the point of origin, Bruno, BR, and the development, which was done at Enfield. So BR from Czechoslovakia, we implemented. Very accurate, very popular, very hard to jam. Introduced into the British Army in about 1938. Planes were immediately sent to Australia, and a special building here at the factory was set up to make it. Started production in 1941. Survived as 303 through to the end of the war and beyond. When NATO changed from 303 to 7.62, Brens were modified to fire the new NATO round successfully. They were made in England, Canada, Australia. The Canadians got a request from China to make Brens in 8mm Mauser, and they did. So a very adaptable gun, very popular with the troops because of its simplicity, a bit heavy, couldn't jam it, easy to service, and it doesn't kick much.
Yeah, I see that your recoil system goes all the way through the butt.
Well, it does, and it fires from an open bolt. A World War II German anti-tank rifle. It's a shoulder-fired weapon.
Whose shoulder did that go on?
Yeah. It weighs 55 kilos bare. Wow. Then you put a 10-shot magazine on it, and it fires the same round as the heavy machine gun on a Tiger tank. It has a heavily padded shoulder pad, a recoil mechanism in the barrel, and a muzzle brake, but rather you than me firing it. We have 3 anti-tank rifles. It was a losing battle. This would go through 30 mils of armour at 300 yards. As soon as the opposition found out, they increased the thickness of the armour and they'd bounce off. anti-tank rifles as a whole died almost instantly when shoulder-fired rockets were introduced. Early 60s through to the 70s, the factory was very much into lost wax casting, investment casting.
Right.
Where you make a wax model of the item you're going to make. You only need a light aluminium mould to inject plastic into that wax. You then dip it in a liquid brick mixture. Dip it, let it dry, dip it, let it dry. When your coating is thick enough, which is typically about 1 centimetre, you put it in a kiln. You fire it, turns it into brick, melts the wax out, pour molten steel in, out comes your product. You just got to chip the mould off.
Right. This is in the 60s.
Yep, the items here were made using that process.
Yep.
They're tank tracks for armoured personnel carriers and weapon tanks.
Wow.
Very useful process for items that are hard to machine.
Right.
You've only got to go through the process once to make the mould. After that, you can churn them out, and in fair detail. The other process that was in use was broaching. It depends on very accurate machining in a tool room, and it's a series of cutters, and each one is 1/10 of a thou higher than the previous cutter, and you put it in a big rigid machine and push it past the job once. The first cutter takes 1/10 of a thou off, the second one takes another 1/10 of a thou off. You can profile the cutters as you go, and when the part comes out, it's done in one pass. That process was used a lot on the manufacture of the L1A1 rifle.
These are the actual cutters.
They're the broach cutters.
Yeah, right. Not a process that's used very often these days, or is it still?
It was discontinued here, and the machines were destroyed.
Yeah.
Broaching as a process is still used.
Okay.
If they really need
Depending what.
some specialised item, they'll buy it in.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of the contraction of the factory is a direct result of changes in technology and manufacturing processes. In here, we've got the drop forged blank 17-pound lump that the body of a Bren gun was machined out of, and it took about 250 machining operations and 500 measurements to make that into a 1.75 pound machine gun body. Now, the top one is a Minimi. It's molded sheet metal. Folded, welded, check the dimensions, finished.
Must be a lot cheaper and a lot quicker.
Yeah, and a lot less swarf, a lot less waste.
Yep.
303 was still using wooden furniture, wooden stock, wooden forehead. The L1A1 had wooden furniture. Some of it was solid, some of it was heat-formed plywood. When they went to the Steyr in 1988, the stock is made out of a fibre reinforced plastic, which can be moulded in one hit. Basically, an example of lost wax casting. The Australian Army in France, Belgium, in the First World War, made a big name for themselves, were very popular, to the point where the French put up a statue, a monument. It is basically an Australian digger bayoneting a German eagle. When the Germans re-invaded in the Second World War, they thought that was a poor idea and destroyed it. In the 60s, there was a commemoration, and the government asked the factory if they would make 3 miniature replicas of that original statue. The factory said, sure, where are the plans? And the government said, no, here's some photos. The factory toolmakers made the lost wax castings for 3 of these miniatures. One has remained here, there's one in the regimental headquarters, one in the Great War Memorial Museum in Bren in France. That's the sort of detail you can get from lost wax casting.